So how's it going? You'll be watching the review for Baywatch, the spoiler version. I haven't really watched too much of the show growing up. I've seen some episodes here and there, but that's when I was just waiting for some other show to come on. So my knowledge of Baywatch is kind of limited. I did watch it through a YouTube series called Baywatching with Allison Pregler, and they're hilarious, by the way. You should really check them out. That's pretty much my knowledge right there of the show. It's through the eyes of someone else. Watching the movie compared to this, it's a little different. It's kind of like 21 Jump Street. You don't have to have the knowledge of the TV show to see the movie, because the movie is kind of its own entity. It takes a show about one thing and turns it into an out-of-context comedy. The movie stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Zac Efron. And Dwayne Johnson, he plays Mitch Buchanan, while Zac Efron plays Brody. Now, the idea of the movie is that it's kind of like old dog versus new dog kind of story. Mitch Buchanan is trying to recruit more lifeguards. Brody shows up to be next big lifeguard. More of a publicity stunt because he messed up his career as an Olympic swimmer. The movie also features some side characters. It also has characters that have existed in the TV show, just now played by someone else. Brody is a mixture of the young male characters throughout the series. Not really one particular, just kind of a combination. Then you have a girl that actually plays CJ, which was previously played by Pamela Anderson. Now, the plot of the movie, of course, is drug smuggling. Usually is for Baywatch. It's usually some kind of bizarre story plot that has nothing to do with the lifeguards, but somehow it involves them. And that's kind of the common joke of the movie, is that the police, especially one officer who kind of represents Garner from the TV show, he reminds them that they're just lifeguards. If there's problems, call the police. Yeah, the movie starts off with new recruits trying to be lifeguards, and they go through training and a challenge. Brody makes it in, of course, not to Mitch's liking, because Mitch wants to protect the beach. Brody is just there for publicity reasons. The movie also features this one guy who is like the slapstick goofball. He's not very much in shape, but then again, who am I to talk? His first impression is that basically he's in love with CJ, and he starts off his part of the movie falling onto a lounge chair and gets his penis stuck in the gaps in the chair. Now, as I said in a spoiler-free version of the review, I'm not a prude about comedy, especially lowbrow. I love lowbrow comedy, but comedy is mostly timing. Timing is a huge essential in comedy. This joke actually goes on for a solid 5 minutes. People trying to get him out of the chair. If you're gonna linger so long on a singular dick joke, then you're just running out of ideas. It's kind of lazy writing, really. I also said the plot of the movie is drug smuggling, and the leader of the drug cartel is this woman from Colombia, which, alright, I like the uniqueness that a drug cartel boss is actually a woman, because usually in these kind of situations they're kind of like the assistant or the girlfriend of the boss, but no, it's actually led by a woman. She's trying to get as much property as she can along the beach so she can expand her drug empire. There are other characters. Another character represented in from the show onto the big screen is Captain Thorpe. In the TV show, Captain Thorpe is just kind of like an older guy, but he got along with everyone. But in the movie, they decided to make him kind of like an asshole, played by this comedic actor that you've seen in so many things, and it works for this particular movie. But moving forward into the plot, Brody ends up staying with Mitch because he doesn't really have anyone else to go to. Another ongoing joke throughout the movie is every time they show Mitch's fish tank, there's a little figurine of him, and each time it's shown, the figurine is dressed differently or in a different pose. There'll be a moment where Mitch is posing in the, little figurine Mitch is posing into the fish tank. Another moment shows Mitch with binoculars looking at Brody, Zac Efron character. And even a scene where, yes, this movie has the classic "you're fired" moment when things don't pan out well at a party. Mitch even has a figurine of him being sad. So Mitch uses the new lifeguards to kind of do some undercover work. There's a whole debacle where things don't work out well, and it reflects badly on Mitch because he's stepping out of the line, so he's fired from being a lifeguard, and Brody is left in charge. Again, it does that whole like transition of like you're off the case, scenario. It has Mitch working at a Sprint store. And while working at the Sprint store, we actually get a cameo by David Hasselhoff, giving him the whole speech of he has to go back and save the day. And the funny part about that is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson plays Mitch Buchanan, but Mitch addresses David Hasselhoff as Mitch as well. So it's just kind of a funny moment of him talking to himself. Not really sure what it represents or what world this is, but it works. And of course, there's this whole other part of the movie where Mitch Buchanan and Brody try to look for evidence against the woman who's killed people in order to get her property so she can sell her drugs. And it winds them up in a morgue. And we're given some more stupid body gross jokes where Mitch tells Brody to check for fingerprints and evidence on the dead body's cadaver's package. So as Brody's looking through his junk, of course it cuts to Mitch taking pictures of him, and it turned out to be a prank. There's fight scenes in it with Mitch Buchanan fighting some henchmen, and they crash through like a little girl's bedroom, and they're breaking things they're fighting, and they fight each other with her toys. The funny moment is a bad guy's trying to attack Mitch with the little girl's picture, and Mitch stops and says, "No, put the picture down. You don't want to damage that." So with Mitch working in Sprint, because all that zaniness of going out of his barriers of a lifeguard is by going through all that is what got him fired. They do have other references in the TV show. For example, when Zac Efron's Brody notices some guy has been stealing things with a cooler that has a latch on a bottom that picks things up, that actually was a thing on the TV show. That happened in an episode. And Brody actually uses the same cooler and goes into Thorpe's office and gets his files, and it turns out that Thorpe, the captain, is in cahoots with the drug cartel. That kind of bothered me a little bit, just a little. Of course, these characters aren't as meaningful, but it's like Mission Impossible, where the bad guy of the movie was actually a good guy in the TV series, and they did it again where they just made a good guy become the bad guy. But finally, The Rock comes along and joins them after, that whole, The Rock returns to help them out, and they're on the boat with the bad guy, and she's trying to do this whole entire party on her yacht, fireworks and everything. She's about to have everything finalized and have her property so she can distribute her drugs. And the final battle actually ends with the woman, and I'm sorry I didn't get her name because she's really not that interesting of an actress or character, but she holds Brody captive, and Mitch Buchanan shows up holding a huge, what looks like a bazooka, but it's really, what's the word? Ends up holding a huge type of firework. I think it's the Chinese candle. Yeah, and then as she's trying to make her escape onto the helicopter, The Rock actually blasts her with a huge bazooka fireworks, and she dies. Now, points to the movie for giving a female villain such a brutal death like that. Not that I'm all for female death, but usually when a female villain is involved, her death is usually off screen, or a simple shot, or she falls off of a building. In this case, she gets blasted with a firework and blows up. And it was just, and in this case, it was just played out for laughs. And of course, at the end, everyone is happy. CJ ends up with a goofy guy that is just there for the fodder. There's another character named Stephanie, who's kind of like Mitch's assistant in the movie. They get together. Zac Efron gets together with his girl. I didn't mention too much of the other characters because they didn't really have an arc. Usually, on the show they don't have that much of an arc, but in this movie they didn't have much of an arc. The movie surrounded mostly through the rivalry of Dwayne Johnson and Zac Efron. Although they do have great comedic timing on screen and they do have that buddy comedy chemistry going. The movie ends with Mitch Buchanan having his job back and they're sitting at the bench celebrating themselves, and Mitch Buchanan announces there's a new captain, and come walking out in slow motion is Pamela Anderson. You know, because she was on the original show. It's kind of dumb though, because she does this whole like slow motion walk, and then of course they pointed out like, oh, she's moving slow, you know, because on the original show everyone ran slow. That's all Pamela Anderson does in this movie. She just shows up for the last minute of the movie, doesn't say a word, and sits down, roll credits. That's all. I'm simplifying the plot because the plot is actually pretty simple, because a movie like this is a comedy and you don't have to go too elaborate. I know it sounds like a lot of complaints, but I actually had fun with the movie. I didn't expect too much out of it. I expected a comedy. I expected to laugh. Baywatch is self-aware. David Hasselhoff is self-aware. Pamela Anderson is self-aware. They all are aware of their career. So it's easier for them to make fun of themselves. That is why I'm going to give the movie a B+, because it was a comedy. It delivered the funny, and it was well worth it. There were many stupid groaning moments, you know, like the sex jokes or whatever, but otherwise the banter was fun. I base movies mostly on the chemistry between the actors. That's not the only part I base my critique on, but it's a huge determining factor. Now that is the spoiler version. There's not really a mid-credit scene, just outtakes and bloopers throughout the credits, and that's all. If they made a sequel to the movie, which I wouldn't be surprised, I would welcome it. Just like I welcomed 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street, which I also really loved. So if you haven't seen the movie, don't just take my word for it. Go see the movie yourself. Have a good one.